What is up, my fellow Doom Patrollers? Welcome to my Season 3, Episode 1 breakdown, recap, and review. Just to let everyone know, just in case my Episode 2 and 3 review aren't out today, they definitely will be up tomorrow, Friday. It's just on top of today's Episode 1 review, there's also Titans coming out. So yeah, they've dropped 3 episodes at once, just in case you weren't aware of that. If you've seen episode 1, you might have 2 more to watch after this, and then it will be a weekly release up until the 10th episode. But how about that first episode? I feel like, after just seeing it for the second time, by the way, like that moment where we have the track playing, all I need is the air that I breathe. You know how to hit me in the feels, Doom Patrol. Every time. Also, I feel like, considering they had to conclude the events of Season 2 and then also springboard us into the events of Season 3, there is so much to unpack just from this first episode, so bear with me as we get into the nitty-gritty details of it all. But let's start right at the beginning, and that is literally where we left off at the end of last season, and that is with Dorothy with the Candlemaker. She wants to change things up by going against Destiny. It's kind of like, why do we have to fight each other? It is kind of the real question, like, Candlemaker, why are we doing this? What's going on? One thing I do kind of come out of this asking is that I am very intrigued to learn or know if it's ever going to be revealed how things would have ended if the pandemic didn't affect the finale of Doom Patrol Season 2, because just in case you aren't aware, they had 2 days left of shooting, and then unfortunately that they couldn't complete that. So as we remember at the end of last season, we had Niles screaming out Dorothy, and that's kind of the cliffhanger it ended on, with Dorothy being taken by the Candlemaker, and now it's kind of picked up with Dorothy returning with the Candlemaker. I guess they kind of hashed it out, and they're friends now, and she walked over to Niles's body before he died of old age, which we can't forget was a thing he gave up last season through making that deal with Willoughby Kipling. You know, if you guys remember the little talisman that made him immortal, that age was catching up with him, and I guess this is what I'm trying to say, like, he's already dead. But I am very interested to know, let's just say pandemic never happened, how different would things have gone? I don't think it would have been dramatically different. I think things would have more or less ended up where we see them now, but it just would have potentially have been a bit of a longer situation, because understandably as well, I don't want to use the word rushed. I just feel like they wanted to get through this, because there's a lot of fans out there, and I understand this as well. You don't always want to make Season 3 feel like the Season 2 finale. You kind of want to put that behind them, and I feel like the way they wrapped it up, but also springboarded us into the Season 3 events, was done very tastefully, and it was also very bittersweet, because, you know, at the end of the day, Niles Calder dying, it really sucks, but I also feel like what they've done through still keeping him in, at least in this episode, and if you've seen up to episode 3, they found very creative ways, especially with the very ending of this episode, thanks to Kipling. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm glad they just didn't, like, yeet Chief out of here. They still found ways to keep him relevant to the story. And honestly, Chief's death is something that really propels the identity theme of this season. Like, who are we now without the Chief? So now we go 1 week later, where everyone's kind of dealing with the aftermath of things, and this is where I would say, like, Season 3, like, kind of properly picks up. We have Robot Man, good old Cliff, being put back together, because we can't forget when he was turned to wax, he was literally in pieces. And we have Cyborg help putting him together, and he realizes that there seems to be something wrong with Cliff's brain, because even though he's been put back together, as we've kind of been teased in with the trailers, if you guys remember, like, his hand is shaking and it's not working, and Grid did a little bit of a scan, and there doesn't seem to be anything kind of anatomically or mechanically, I guess you could say, wrong with him. There's something going on up here. Then we cut to a scene of Larry and Rita in the kitchen, arguably, if not my favorite pairing. I love these two so much, and it's I need to stop going on these tangents, but it's so hard for me to choose between Cliff and Jane and Larry and Rita for my favorite pairing on the show. But here they're kind of trying to come to terms with how they feel after Niles' death. Even Larry saying, you know, I've kind of fantasized about this before, but it's not the way I thought I would feel when Chief would die. And Rita kind of goes into how their relationship with the Chief was complex, and how she's kind of taken great lengths to deal with her grief, and I just love the way Rita acts sometimes like that, when she has to kind of put on that, like, composed front. It also just comes across quite hilarious at the same time. We have Dorothy come in the kitchen to get some frozen peas out the freezer, because she's keeping Niles' body, well, she's just basically trying to stop it from rotting so Jane can come back, wake up, and say her goodbyes, because everyone had a unique relationship with Niles Calder, which makes this show so interesting, and just, this is one of the many few little threads that make it so interesting, like how these characters all kind of love Chief in their own way, yet he's the very thing that made their life a ruin, so to speak. And I think one of the biggest things that clearly this season is going into is the relationship Chief had with Rita, and how sentimental that was, despite saying what I just said, with him causing all of her pain technically in the first place. And we'll get to that, especially with this somewhat legacy she feels she has to adopt with that letter that Niles left her with a certain key. But as I was saying, back to the main point with Jane's always had a bit more, I would say, a bit more of a relationship, considering, and I've always liked the way Doom Patrol showed this, with the way Niles took a lot of time to get to know the personalities. He really connected with Baby Doll. I think Jane was one of, if not the most devastated when she learned about the secret of Niles in season 1. So yeah, I think Dorothy knows that she needs to keep Niles around so Jane can say goodbye. This then leads to a very nice scene between Larry and Dorothy, because we had Rita kind of powering that off on Larry, and she also had to do her own thing with the play and my bees. But no, yeah, Larry moments are always so lovely. And I feel like any scene that he's paired with another character in, when it comes to some kind of advice or whatever, it's always so heartfelt. So he gives a little piece of advice with regards to how he got lost in his memories for decades, and he was kind of staggered by how much of his life was lost by holding on to them. He doesn't want Dorothy to waste those years through latching on as much as he did, and I don't think Dorothy will necessarily do that, but it's still a thing that you should kind of be a little bit apprehensive about when kind of dealing with death, I suppose. You can't obviously get rid of anything. It kind of speaks to something larger, which is something Doom Patrol always manages to do in some semblance, in some way. You can always relate to it, which is why I think so many people love this show. And what I can kind of take out of this is, you know, we should cherish our memories with our loved ones and the people we may have lost and whatnot, but also we can't let that also completely dominate our lives at the same time, to the point of where you can never really move on. And moving on is never a linear path, and that's what I kind of liked with what Larry said here as well, and how he still kind of needs to figure that one out. But the main takeaway is not to be kind of anchored by the loss of someone. And you may have heard me talk in my no spoilers review about the aspect of mystery this season, and how of course we've had mystery in this show before. Like, we didn't really know what was going on with Mr. Nobody, how was he linked with Niles and stuff, and season 2, you know, there was some mysterious aspects of course, but this particular one, which with the scene that we're about to speak about next, with Rita receiving that letter in her room with a little kind of ribbon on some kind of gift from Niles, really springboards the mystery into this season. All the way up into the 5 episodes that I've seen, I still don't have all the pieces of the puzzle put together, and as I want to kind of reassure you guys, it's not in like a frustrating way, it's kind of still capitalizing on all of these aspects of Doom Patrol that we love, but then there's this, with whatever Niles has left behind, and it is super intriguing, and I also love how that's been given to Rita, because as I said, everyone had a very specific relationship with Niles Calder, the Chief, even down to Cliff himself. We know how Cliff feels about Niles, but there's still something there between those two characters. But above all and everyone else, Rita is one of the longest standing members, and as we've kind of already been over, despite what Chief did, I feel like Rita's still always been the one to try and see past some things and be compassionate to Niles at the end of the day. And that's when this moment comes in, where there's a letter saying, "Dearest Rita, as I've often told you, there are mysterious things in this world that bear keeping an eye on." And there's something about just hearing Timothy Dalton talk like this. It's always so captivating. I know I sound like I'm fanboying right now. Maybe I am, but I don't know. I love this particular scene. Now, he goes on to say that this was the mission that I lived my life in service of, which is also interesting because we know that Niles had, you know, like his gig at the Bureau of Oddities, and it was genuinely a gig before it turned into the Bureau of Normalcy, DLC, which was such a deviated, effed up version, so to speak, that, you know, beforehand it was genuinely about finding the oddities in the world and whatnot, and keeping an eye on them. But I would have liked to have thought that, from what Doom Patrol has showed us before, the mission that he lived his life in service of was technically probably to try and find a way through the Immortus project to stay alive forever so he could look after his daughter. I thought that's what his, you know, main life mission was, you could say. So hearing whatever this pertains to and still not knowing properly has piqued my interest, because there is yet another thing, despite everything we know, that he went to great lengths and efforts to keep himself alive forever so he could always live one day longer than Dorothy, as we've learned previously. There's something else bigger than that, maybe. And he says, in my death, I must place that burden on your capable shoulders. I hereby leave the secret to you. And he also says that I pray you never need it. Yet again, piquing my interest. But should the time come, you are the only one I trust. Best wishes, Niles. Which yet again kind of shows how Niles viewed Rita out of kind of everyone else. Rita is the one he kind of trusts most. So Rita is clearly such a significant character this season, especially if you've kind of seen a couple of episodes ahead. We're not really going to talk about that, but it feels like there's this kind of starting point and everything is kind of flooding out with Rita, with all the spider's webs that kind of connect to it, and I'm dying to know how it all fits together. But this was a great way to already, as I've kind of mentioned thus far, we've already kind of wrapped up the season 2 stuff, and we're already at a good pace and a point of intrigue that's launched our way into the season 3 story. Despite everything I've said that's kind of been tided over with the main threat of last season with regards to the Candlemaker, there are still some threads that have left to be reeled in, so to speak, with regards to Jane's storyline last season, because we can't forget, at this point in time, she's still passed out in the real world, and she's deep in the underground, in the well, where she found out that Miranda has actually been dead for a long time. Yet again, it feels like maybe things have been changed. I'm not saying they have been, but we were all thinking that last season, the idea behind the actual Miranda in the underground, who had been killing off the personalities, was kind of like a manifested personality of K. Chalice's father, which is such a messed up thing to kind of imagine, but psychologically speaking, anything is kind of possible. I mean, it really is. But it turns out in this episode that she is, and I think this is probably a more interesting twist, she is the manifestation of depression, I guess you could say. Imagine anything dark that you've ever experienced and then just manifested into a personality, and then with this iteration for Jane in Doom Patrol, when we know how primaries work, imagine a personality being born of depression and everything dark in you. It would only kind of strive for one thing, and that is to, yeah, basically what it does in real life. It eats us out from the inside and also can get to a very, very ugly point, which very luckily wasn't reached in this episode, but very, very close. But I thought, once again, I have to give such merit to the show, because with Jane's story here, it was such a relatable tale of kind of overcoming your inner demons, and that was so masterfully done with the way things unfolded in this episode. So she got out the well, and then she was seeing all these other personalities who had kind of been, and you can look at this symbolically, like when you have a mental health condition like that, I'm not saying we all have tons of personalities, but you can almost look at these personalities as parts of yourself. And in this episode, when Jane herself hadn't quite got to the point of where she had faded out and was doing the puzzle like all of these other personalities, you can liken them to be this symbolic meaning of parts of ourselves that were putting up a fight against a mental health struggle, whatever. Sometimes they can be conquered by that darkness, and that's the way I kind of interpret this. All of the other personalities have kind of zoned out, and they can't really fight too much anymore, and Jane was just like one of the few, if not the only one left. Even the train driver, when she tried to get back to the surface, and it was up to Jane to try and break through that. And it even got to a point of where this affected Jane herself, because we had that little confrontation with Miranda where she revealed that she wasn't the father, so to speak. Every doubt, every fear, every hurt, she is the wound that you can't help but scratch. I loved all these lines because, yet again, I feel like anyone could identify with the very description of what the bleak black void that sometimes all of us have felt at some point in our lives would be. But we had Kay, the girl at the heart of all of this, reach out to Jane, and this was also really cool because through offering that little hope through finding Harry once again, she figures out a way that Jane could possibly get from the underground to the surface again, and that is through a plane. And she actually revealed this was the original way to become the primary, or kind of get up to the surface, before she even built the underground. Now, we will revisit this story in a little bit, but we need to carry on with that moment with Rita. Now, I found this next scene absolutely hilarious. I love the little kind of Cloverton play, if you will, because initially we have Rita looking at a little kind of trinket or keychain that Niles left her, and then we have that woman coming in playing the blob, basically Rita. She's got like a massive kind of suit that will expand out to imitate Rita's powers, and then Rita comes on the stage and she's like, my bees, but she kind of breaks down because this is really the pain that she's been dealing with in trying to overcome Niles' death, all wash out at once. So she says she doesn't really know what she's supposed to do next. What does Niles want me to do? Clean up his mess? He turned me into nothing and now he wants me to be something else. I won't, I can't. All of this, I found it was such a deep dive into it's like cracking in that open heart vulnerability to Rita and seeing how she's really feeling in this moment. And it's really sad because you see that disdain for this man, but you see this love, even through that line of where she says, I won't, I can't, I hate him for asking, and I hate myself for hating him, because I loved him too. And I never told him either of those things, and now it's too late. So just seeing the Doom Patrol all kind of process Niles' death, even in their own ways, was a beautiful way to unfold at this episode, and it still felt in the next couple of episodes and whatnot. But as I said, Rita is the one who hits home, I think, most. I would have thought beforehand that would have been Jane, but we didn't actually get a goodbye as much as I thought we would have with Jane, and I thought it would have been cool to have maybe let her speak to the ghost, but maybe that's kind of a deliberate robbery, because sometimes you want that kind of sour feeling of how you can't get that closure. But yeah, the same thing with Rita here. The reason why I say that is just because, as we can clearly tell, Niles trusts her more than anyone. So clearly these two have a bond that is obviously also wrecking Rita in this moment, because yeah, she's now been handed something, a burden, as Niles puts it, and it's kind of like, for crying out loud, really? And whilst you're also dealing with the struggles of everything. Now Rita's face starts melting in this moment, and I didn't expect this. She's revealing herself as the Blob Lady to the play about the Blob Lady event from season 1, and it was absolutely hilarious. I noticed more things like this in the second time round I watched it. So we also had the guy who was playing Cliff, Robot Man, in his little crappy kind of Robot Man get up for the play, saying the fuck, when he saw Rita's face melting. So that was a perfect hint to Cliff Steele's character. And then we even also had the donkey there, and I think this was one of my favorite moments in the episode. It's so stupid, I know, because it's just such a 2-second thing, but whoever was in that donkey suit and just like shaking his legs with like the Farr and like obviously the smoke machine coming out, just such simple comedy and brilliant throwbacks to the first season, just depicted through this play. I loved it. Next up, we revisit Cyborg, and this time Silas has come to Doom Manor, and he kind of spotted Chief on the way in, and he thought it could have been some kind of experiment knowing Niles, or is he dead? I felt like this scene was a nice moment between Silas and Vic. They've come a long way, but there were lines that were speaking to this larger storyline for Cyborg. You could say, for example, when Silas said, we try so hard to change the ones we love, and it took me a lifetime to see the futility in that, and you could liken that to Cyborg trying to change Ronnie, because Ronnie is who she is right now, and it's interesting to think, is there any kind of hope for her getting past her previous pain, which is kind of governing her actions of who she is today? And Cyborg is somewhat latched onto that, because he's low-key basically in love with her. In that scene with Silas, we see that he's got pictures of her up, kind of tracking her movements. And to skip to a scene a little bit later, just to kind of keep it a little bit more cohesive, we see that Ronnie has headed to Quorum HQ, and she's basically brought in some C4 or some kind of bomb to blow up the building, basically, with people in it. And sure, it's that kind of thing of, it's not fair after what's happened to me to let these people get away with it, but then it's the kind of other perspective from the hero saying, yeah, I get that, but this isn't the way to go about it. There's some people here who truly might not be evil, and you might just be blowing them to smithereens kind of style. But clearly Ronnie is in a lot of pain, and I like how they still managed to include this storyline in this season. I do wonder how this will continue in future episodes, just because there were little hints of like, you don't want to be a name on my list, because clearly they care about each other, but if Cyborg's going to keep getting in her way and stopping her from doing things, then she might want to kind of take him out, so to speak. So is that going to be a thing that comes back later on this season? But regardless, this all kind of fizzled out with Cyborg giving her heads up about the police that he's got to call in a couple of minutes time so she can get away. And the bottom line for this with Cyborg, which kickstarts him into his next storyline through what he did in this very scene, is that he saw it as an opportunity to stop someone from doing something bad and, you know, put them on the right path, but still people still kind of get arrested with intent to do things, and I think that's the thing that kind of shot Cyborg in the foot. Now, up next with Cliff, and once again, I didn't expect this when I saw that for the first time. He got to have scenes with Niles in ghost mode, and I do, like, as my inner fan, I'm a bit like, you know, over Jane not being able to see Niles as a ghost, but I do like to think that's a very deliberate, bittersweet decision. But this was so funny. Cliff is always so funny. Brendan Fraser, he always just kills it. I've mentioned this before, but like, you would have thought the, you know, fuck moments would just get old, but they never do. They honestly just never ever do. Niles reveals to Cliff that he thinks his spirit is trapped here because it hasn't kind of been sent off properly, and then if there's one person who would kind of do the right thing, and that's through burning it, no other person would enjoy that more than Cliff. But that is when Cliff just laughs his head off. The good thing about this scene is that it still offers a sense of closure, because despite the little squabble and argument and whatnot, even Chief saying that, you know, you're so full of shit, Cliff, and whatnot, it is still got some closure through Timothy Dalton's Niles revealing that despite any of this or whatever, that he sent the tape to Clara so she would get lots of answers about what happened to her father, why it happened, where he's been this whole time. A lot of clarity there to be made. He was hoping it could fix things and whatnot, and I still love the response that Brendan Fraser's freaking Cliff had. There isn't a single gesture in this goddamn universe that could fix things between us, but thank you. When you have someone like a character like Niles do everything that he's done, it is basically, it's not repairable, so to speak. So the fact that you could get to some kind of bridge here, you know, with the thank you, I think that is the end of the road paved for these two characters, so to speak. And it was nice. And also I like how, you know, I'm guessing Timothy Dalton wasn't actually really here. He was probably filming this in front of a green screen, and this is how I said, like, it's cool and how creative, how they managed to still keep him in the show and through a ghost form, so to speak. And don't get me started on how he was going to partake in the sex ghost activity towards the end. I love this show. But anyway, we have Cliff call Clara, and it turns out she is having a baby. Like, right here, right now. Once again, a very perfectly timed oh fuck from Cliff. We have Larry in bed as well, and this scene was really bittersweet because of the way it ended, but we have this moment where the negative spirit is trying to communicate with Larry, and we even hear Valentina Voskov's voice kind of through the negative spirit trying to say to him, like, if you ever want to kind of sort things out or get a new perspective on Earth, I recommend space. And basically the negative spirit is saying, hey, let's go, like, things here are somewhat resolved now after 2 seasons. We can do our thing now and see what's next for us. And Larry comes to the conclusion of, look, okay, the cord I've been clinging on for almost 60 years is finally cut, and everything, including you, is telling me it's my time to go. But he is thinking of Rita, and that just kind of melts my heart. It really does. He feels like he needs to stay for her, and to rub it in even more, we have Rita literally standing right outside the freaking door, feeling probably guilty that she is an anchor for Larry to stay here. So you just know what the writer's room were doing and what they were like giggling probably away in their heads, imagining us being like But up next, we are propelled back into the underground. This is kind of like the face-off between the manifestation of depression, I guess you could say, is at least what I'm going to call Miranda, and the liberation of kind of Kay Chalice as a person, or Jane and all the personalities, overcoming that. All of the personalities arrive in this moment to absolutely wreck Miranda. She says, you've forgotten, not only do I control your mind, I control your body as well. And she literally did, and she was going to go and hang herself. But also, it does such a good job at showing showing the perseverance that people have and can draw out of this episode. I think so many people love this, and that's why so many people love Jane as a character anyway, for showing the perseverance of fighting back and literally and figuratively, flying into that freedom and taking back your own control, just like Jane did. She burst through the frickin' puzzle monster of the father, and she became the primary again just in time. And I thought it was very sweet how Cliff just managed to kind of hold her back as well. But then I think the writers knew exactly what they were doing as well when Jane went to hug Cliff. That was very touching. And then everyone started coming in for a group hug, and she was like, no, okay, not that. But it is still nice seeing that Cliff and Jane do most certainly have that connection, and they're not even embarrassed to hide it. But when it comes to everyone else, okay, you're not on the Cliff and Jane level. I do feel like that puzzle moment where they were all giggling, all the personalities, it was like a collective healing moment, and just showing how you can overcome the darkness and even making it taste whatever you want it to be. I don't feel like I even need to articulate what you can take out of this. It's a very powerful story, and it was a nice wholesome ending, seeing Kay laugh like that, all of the personalities laugh like that, and just kind of consume that darkness themselves and not let the darkness consume them. But then there's this scene, I'm not even joking, brought me to tears both times I've seen it. And it's not just this scene, it's also the music, the air that I breathe, that just fit in so well with it. So we had Larry and Rita sitting outside, and she basically says, I'm gonna be alright on my own, When she says, I'll always be there for you, it really hits me in the feels, because as I've said, these two characters are arguably the longest standing Doom Patrol members, which is why you as an audience member can really, through everything we've seen set up over these 2 seasons, resonate with their connection so much. So such sincerity and bittersweetness here in this moment. Larry doesn't want to leave Rita, knowing that she's got some struggles, but she doesn't want to, make him feel grounded to this place when he's got some shite to deal with and do. It was just such a, it was so lovely. He looks up to the stars and he says, it's not just up to me anymore. I thought it was absolutely hilarious to make the decision to let the negative spirit kind of take him off in such a fast and, wobbly kind of way, because he's so eager to get back to wherever he wants to get back to. And then this just turned into such a wonderful montage of where things are left off at the end of episode 1. We have Cliff at the hospital with his daughter, and his grandson even, and he remembers what it feels like, and we get a real life scene of Brendan Fraser being the father to Clara back in his human body, because obviously he was around when she was born, and that was this is such a full circle, and this is what I've kind of mentioned in my no spoiler review. You would have thought where they're at now is the peak for their characters. What more could you have given Robot Man to have reconnected with his family that he lost through all of that troubled history, to then hold his grandson, newborn baby, in the arms? You would have thought there's not much story after that, because it's gone full circle, right? It's the best that he could possibly have got to a point, but no. There is more. There is so much more. Even though we have almost this wholesome full circle for certain characters in certain ways, even Larry, he's flying away. You would have thought this would be an end point. But with Nas's death, it's now about navigating who we are as a team, who we are without, as Larry said, the cord that has, been keeping me connected for 60 years has been severed and cut. Who is Rita now, especially with the new burden and everything? Everything is still a propelling point from here on out, also whilst contrasting what feels like a closing point for the characters. And that's just such a... I just wanted to bring that up because it's so interesting. And when we had Larry, this is probably one of my most vivid, if I think of Doom Patrol in a memory, maybe it's just because I've just seen the episode again, but I don't think I'm ever going to get out of my head the beauty of the reel of Larry flying in the clouds. He has scars, the bandages are flying off him, the scars are healing into Matt Bomer's face, the music being all I need is the air that I breathe and, and to love you. It's just, I'm getting goosebumps again now. I can't articulate any more than that. It was such a sense of what I was just talking about, wholesomeness, adventure, even though there's much more story to go from here on out. It was a beautiful way to end the episode with that song and with the scenes that were playing. And it's kind of funny as well in a way, because lots of people have fan casted Matt Bomer as Superman, so just seeing him kind of fly like that, It was just so good. So good. As I said earlier with the bit about Jane, so, you know, with her part in this little montage, she was zipping up the bag to Niles, so we didn't really get to see that goodbye. We get to see Danny the ambulance. The last time we saw Danny was when they were retired. You know that Dorothy is in very safe hands being with Danny. And I wonder where all the Dannysons are, by the way. Maybe they're just like, I don't know. By the way, Danny teleports to the burial place of her mother, and as Dorothy says, we're going on quite an adventure. And it was just, you know, as I keep articulating at this point, this ending of the episode couldn't have been more wholesome. Then 1 week later it comes on screen, and we are propelled into what really launches us into the next narrative point for all the characters, and Rita being kind of the one most anchored to this, and that is the burden of the secret of what Niles left her, that key and the keychain. And that's when the little communication device starts ringing. I have to admit, it's absolutely fascinating seeing Rita swear sometimes, because she's not a character who swears so much. So just even seeing her walk down Doom Mountain's hallway and just saying, oh, for fuck's sake, it's absolutely priceless. I like how Rita, it was actually kind of half ready to answer the phone call, because she even says herself the very quote that Niles left her, where it's like she's not psychologically ready for it. Every time she reached out for the phone, her hand flopped. She's not quite ready to take on that mantle, so if you could use that word for whatever this journey of hers is. And it says arrival imminent, arrival imminent. Now, I'm so fascinated because, as I said, even with being 5 episodes in like me, I still can't connect everything together. I know, like, the arrival imminent, you can clearly attribute that to the ending with Madame Rouge. But then it's like, what is this burden that Niles left her for if she should ever need to use it? So it's just like, well, what does that mean? And why would Rita need to use this if the arrival imminent was clearly pointing towards the arrival of Madame? I don't know, but it's so interesting and it's piqued my curiosity. And this is when the end of the episode kind of comes. As I said, I love the musical. I love that they went through this effort to do that with, I think if I remember roughly, an ending is a new beginning. We're heroes and our future is up to us. That is most certainly true, especially without the chord that they were connected to, Niles being around. I love how almost piss-takey it is. We have the woman who was playing Rita the Blob coming out of the stage exit or whatever, and she was just spinning and spinning. It's just like, I don't know how to articulate it. It's just like, it's such a piss-takey moment, but that's when Madame Rouge arrives, and I love how on the nose this show is. I love it. Like, you know, she literally, first thing she does as she gets out, Michelle Gomez, absolutely fantastic, is takes a piss on the floor, and they don't shy away from it when she's like, you know, cleaning herself up, you could say, with the poster. It's just so on the nose. Some people would recoil at that, but for me, I'm laughing my ass off. It is just, this is the essence that is Doom Patrol, you could say. She asks, you wouldn't happen to know where I could find Niles Calder. Poor girl who played Rita the Blob falls down the little crack in the earth that Madame Rouge made, arriving there in the first place, and she's like, you know, I guess I'll have to find it myself then. I already loved this character as soon as I saw her, and yeah, it's just starting that next chapter. I can't really say anything more about this other than getting into episode 2 and 3, but that is for those videos. But they've started introducing little kind of mid-credit scenes, which I thought was really cool. It is really pleasantly surprising, and that was with, and you should have seen my reaction, I was like, yes, Kipling, because I didn't actually know if they were going to go more into Niles after this. I thought genuinely that might have been it, after Danny the ambulance took Dorothy and Niles away. And that is when Kipling decapitated Niles and saying, smile, Calder, the world ain't done with you yet, old man. I was just so happy that I was like, yes, I know, like, Timothy Dalton was still going to be involved, but I didn't know how much, but clearly he's going to be involved a little bit more. So thank you, Kipling, for doing this, even though it's a bit messed up. Other than that, slightly before this, we had that moment with the sex ghost. They invite him to join, and he's like, oh, what the hell? And good on you, old man. Good on, I mean, why not? Like, if, you know, like, why not? It's not like you've got much else to do. That was so tastefully done once again. I couldn't love this show anymore. That you knocked it out the park with this first episode. I'm being very honest there. I know I'm a big fan, but I don't know how much better this could have been handled. So, you know, I think that is everything before we get on to episode 2, Vacay Patrol, which, you know, really starts the chapter with the beginnings of the Brotherhood of Evil and diving into even more of that trippy mystery. I'm very happy, guys. I know I spoke about this for a long time, but I just wanted to really get my thoughts out on absolutely everything. I thought it was a stellar way to introduce Season 3, especially with all of the difficulties they had to adapt to of the pandemic. I feel like they fared better than any other show that I've had the experience of watching, dealing with the interruptions that the pandemic caused. They capitalize upon what makes Doom Patrol Doom Patrol. They offer this innovation that doesn't feel invasive to what makes up the DNA of this show. And what more could you ask for with a new season of a show? So I truly wholeheartedly mean that. And I would love to know your thoughts on Doom Patrol Season 3, Episode 1, how they handled things, everything like that. I would really appreciate it if you left a like on this video. Make sure you subscribe to never miss out on a future video from me. As always, in the top pinned comment of the comment section, you should see my comment, which will leave links to my Twitter, other places to support me, like my merch store, where you can maybe get one of these yourself if you've got this far. But thank you so much for watching. Hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Doom Patrollers in the next video. Goodbye.